Hey, hello. Don't touch that phone yet. Wait 1 second. I want to ask you a question and I want you to sit with it honestly. When was the last time you woke up and your first feeling was peace? No relief that you survived another night, not the anxious scan of your brain trying to calculate whether your M-Pesa balance can handle today, not the dread of checking whether fuel went up again and or whether the shilling dropped again or whether some official said something outrageous again. When was the last time, honestly, that your first feeling at 6 a.m. was simply, I'm okay, today's gonna be okay? If you can't remember, then you're not alone. And that silence, that inability to name a recent morning of peace, that is what today's conversation is about. Welcome back to the Sense of Self podcast. I'm your host, Kipkaskei John. And as always, we say here, we turn anything into a conversation. Now, I know I usually come through with the motivation vibes, the things that are happening for you, energy, and I stand by all that. I'll always stand by that. But today we have to earn the good vibes. Today we have to go through something fast because what I've been noticing or what I've been hearing from people in the DM, in conversation, in the eyes of a stranger on the street is that we are carrying something very heavy and we've been carrying it so long that we've started to think the weight is normal. Question: what happens to a nation when fear becomes its daily language? This isn't about an episode about politics exactly. It isn't an episode about economics exactly. It isn't an episode about what all of it is doing to us, to our minds, to our relationship, or our sense of who we are and what is possible. It is an episode about psychology, identity, resilience, and responsibility. It is an episode that I believe we need right now, perhaps more than any other conversation we should be having. So I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes or an hour. Get your tea, just like the one I'm having. Sit down. If you're on a matatu, plug in your earphones and let the world outside do what it does while we do this in here. Because once again, it's never that complicated. And yet, somehow, right now, everything feels impossibly complicated. Let us figure out why. And more importantly, let's figure out what we do about it. Let me start with people, not statistics, not percentage, just people. I want you to think about a woman. I'll call her Bleatin. Bleatin wakes up at 4:45 a.m. She's a mama mboga. She has a small stall, the kind with a blue tap and a wooden table and three types of skuma wiki and some tomatoes and maybe on a good week some dania and such and such. She has been at this for 6 years. She knows her customers by name. She knows who is paying school fees, who just lost a job, and who needs a credit until Friday. Last year, Bleatin was adjusting her prices maybe once a month. Now she adjusts them three times a week. The price of tomatoes from Wakulima market goes up. The cost of the matatu she uses to transport her stocks goes up. The levy that used to be 20 shillings at the market is now 50 shillings. And her customers, they're not earning more. So she either raises her prices and lose customers or she keeps her prices and loses money. There's no good option. Every morning, Blitin does the math in her head before she even opens her eyes. The math is her first conversation of the day. The math is fear in arithmetic form. Now, think about Brian. Brian is a 26-year-old. He graduated from a public university with a degree in information technology. He spent 5 years there plus 2 extra years because the lecturers went on strike twice. He came out with a second upper class and a head full of optimism and a LinkedIn profile that he has updated 17 times. He has applied to close to 73 jobs and he has been called for 4 interviews. He got one offer, an internship, unpaid internship in Westlands for experience. His parents are in Eldoret. They took a loan to educate him. The loan is not asking for experience. The loan wants money. Brian is now in a bedsitter in Kaha West. Let's see. He does small graphic design gigs on Fiverr, for sometimes 3,000 shillings a month. He has stopped telling his parents the full truth because the conversation ended in tears. His mother's tears, his father's silence, which is somehow worse. Brian goes to sleep knowing he's not where he's supposed to be. And he wakes up with the same knowing that fear, that it's a fear of a different kind, that it's the fear of becoming a disappointment to the people who believed in you the most. And now, this one I think about the most, our good people, the boda riders. Let us call him Kipu. Kipu is out right now. Right now, as you're listening to this, it doesn't matter whether you're hearing this, Kipu is out. You can see him if you peek through your window right now. It's raining, or it's hot, or it's in the middle of the night. But the constant factor, he's out. He's not thinking about the GDP growth projection the government released some other time. He's thinking about the prices of petrol, which he buys at full retail price, while the people who set the prices travel in a fuel subsidized motorcades. He's thinking about the police officer at the roundabout who already stopped him twice for this week for the famous inspection, which we all know, which both of them know is not really about the bike. He's thinking about his child school fees, which are due on Friday, and it is Wednesday, and he only has 800 shillings. For Kipum, the economy is not a graph on a news channel. The economy is a knot in his stomach that never fully loosens. The economy is the calculation he runs every single time he drops a passenger. Is this enough? Is this really enough? I tell you, or I'm telling you these stories not to depress you, though I acknowledge some of you might have felt something shift in your chest just now. I'm telling you these stories because when we talk about the state of the nation, we often end up talking about big buildings, big numbers, big names, but the nation is me. The nation is Blitin. The nation is Brian. The nation is Kipu. The nation is you, sitting right now whenever you are carrying whatever you're carrying. And here is the psychological truth that we need to name. When a person lives in a state of constant uncertainty, when survival requires their full cognitive and emotional bandwidth every single day, something happens to the brain. Psychologists call it cognitive load overload. Essentially, your mental hard drive is so full of surviving that there is no space left for anything else. No space for creativity, no space for long term planning, no space even for joy. You're not lazy, you're not unmotivated. Your brain is simply doing exactly what a human brain does when it perceives constant threat. It narrows its focus to right now, right here, the immediate danger. Everything else, dreams, ambition, civic engagement, hope, gets pushed to a background that keeps going further and further away. And when you multiply that by 40 million people, you don't just have individuals suffering. You have a nation operating below its potential. Not because the people aren't extraordinary, they are. They really are. But because extraordinary people cannot build extraordinary futures when they are spending all of their energy on the extraordinary work of simply getting throughout the day. We are living in a state of collective mental emotion exhaustion, and we need to name it before we can address it. I've previously done episodes on the war in our heads, and I want to return that to that conversation today because right now that war has a very specific enemy, and the enemy is fear, not the healthy kind of fear, the kind that keeps you from touching a hot stove or from crossing a highway on foot. The fear is your friend. I'm talking about the chronic kind, the ambient kind, the kind that hums in the background of everything you do, like a bad Wi Fi that never quits, that never quite drops, but never quite works either. Let me break down what chronic fear actually does. And I want to be specific because I think when we understand the mechanism, we stop blaming ourselves for how we are feeling. First, fear changes your decision making. When we are in a fear state, we become short term thinkers by neurological design. The amygdala, I don't know if I'll pronounce it correctly, the part of your brain that processes threats, essentially hijacks your prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for rational long-term planning. This is why you stop planning for 10 years from now. It's not that you don't care about your future, it's that your brain operating in a perceived threat environment cannot prioritize a future it isn't sure exists. This is why so many young Kenyans right now are not saving, not investing, not starting businesses with multi-year timelines, not because they are irresponsible, but because the environment is telling their nervous system there may not be a multi-year timeline worth planning for. Think about that. Think about what we are losing as a nation when the cognitive energy from an entire generation is consumed by survival mode. Second, fear changes our relationship. This one is painful to talk about. Fear makes us tribal. And I don't just mean politically tribal, though it does that too. I mean it makes us retreat into our smallest cycles of trust. It makes us suspicious. When you are afraid, you are constantly assessing who is safe, who is with me, who might betray me. And in Kenya right now, that assessment is being done through the lens of tribe, of the region, of political affiliation. We look at our neighbors and instead of seeing a person who wakes up with the same 6 a.m. fear, who has the same hope for their children, who loves nyamachoma and hates bad traffic, we see a category. We see their tribe. We see who they voted for. We wonder if they are mtu wetu or mtu wao. Social media has weaponized this, the algorithms. And I want to say this, the algorithms on the platform we use every day are designed to prioritize outrage. They have learned from billions of data points that anger and fear keeps us scrolling longer than joy and nuance. So they feed us more with of what makes us afraid and furious because that is what keeps us online. And we exhausted looking for some sense of urgency, take that bait. We share the inflammatory post, we argue in the comments, we get tiny hint of dopamine from winning on an online argument with a stranger, and then we put the phone down and we are somehow made more afraid, more angry, more divided than we were before we picked it up. We have become addicted to outrage. And I have to ask the hard question: is our outrage online translating to anything in real life? Or is the screen the place where our hope goes to die? Third, fear erodes community trust. When was the last time you saw a government announcement and your first reaction was to take it at face value? And when was the last time a public institution did something? NHIF, now SHA, or yeah, and the NGCDF, a county government project, and your first response was, "Great, this actually worked." If you're honest, you probably laughed and you went looking for the catch, or you shared the announcement with the laughing emoji. That reflex, that instinctive cynicism is not stupidity, it is learned. It is what happened when trust is broken repeatedly. Psychologists call this institutional betrayal trauma, when the institutions that are supposed to protect you, that is the healthcare, justice, education, security, constantly fail you or exploit you. Your brain learns to accept betrayal. And once that learning is encoded, it is incredibly hard to undo, even when a genuine change is happening. The result, we stop believing that things can be better. We stop believing that engagement is worth it. We stop believing that our voices matter. And ironically, this disengagement, that surrendering of civic energy, is exactly what makes things worse. The less we engage, the more space there is for those who are engaged for the wrong reasons. There is a concept in psychology called learned helplessness. It was first observed in experiments with animals. You expose an animal to a painful stimulus, it cannot escape, and eventually, when an escape route opens, the animal doesn't take it. It has learned that escape is not possible, so it stops trying. I'm not comparing us to animals, yeah, although we are, but I'm not comparing animals in a lab. I'm saying that when people experience enough cycle of hope, effort, disappointment, they began to internalize the belief that nothing they do changes anything. And that belief, once it takes root, it is one of the most dangerous forces in any society. Not because it is comfortable, it is measurable, but because it is passive. It doesn't make noise. It does not protest. It does not vote. It just withdraws quietly into a cynicism and numbness and the daily business of survival. And a nation full of people who have given up on the possibility of change, that is a nation that is genuinely at risk. I'm going to dedicate this next section specifically to the young listeners. And if you're not young, listen anyway, because these are your children, your siblings, your students, your employees. This conversation belongs to all of us. Something is happening with the youth right now, and that I don't think we are talking about it honestly enough. And it is this: we are a generation that is caught between two impossible narratives. Narrative one: Kenya is broke and you should live. You see it everywhere. The passport application queues that snake around, billings for hours, the Mombasa Road at 2 a.m., the application of visa, quite except for the airport bound taxis carrying another software engineer, another nurse, another doctor, another accountant off to Canada or Germany or Australia. The WhatsApp groups where how to apply for PR in the UK gets more engagement than any local news story. The normalization, the celebration even of the phrase, "I'm getting out of Kenya" or "I'm leaving the country." And listen, I'm not judging anyone who has left or is planning to leave. I understand it. I genuinely do. When the system consistently fails to reward your talent, your effort, your sacrifice, when you watch people with the connection and corruption advance while you do everything right and stand still, the rational response is to find a system that will reward you. That is not betrayal, that is self preservation. But here's what I want us to hold alongside that truth. Every person who lives takes something irreplaceable with them. Skills, yes. Energy, yes. But also, this is the part we don't talk about enough. They take belief, they take the lived testimony that Kenya could have used, and they often take their children, which means their children will build something great, but they will build it somewhere else. The brain drain is real. It is not new. But what feels new right now is the emotional equality of it. It used to be that people left with grief, a sense of loss, a promise to come back. Now, some people are living with relief, a sigh of relief. And when people leave a place with a relief, that tells you that something important about what staying feels like. The second narrative is Kenya is your responsibility and you must stay and fight. This is the counter narrative, and it's not wrong. It is, in fact, deeply true. The Kenya that will be worth living in, the Kenya that your children and their children will inherit, will not be built by people who are somewhere else. It will be built by the people who are here at the moment. We saw a version of this energy in the 2024 during the Gen Z protest. And whatever you think of the politics of that moment, something undeniable happened. Young people in Kenya who had been written off as apathetic, as too online to care, as they Slay Queen, TikTok generation, those young people stood up in numbers that surprised even themselves. They organized using the very tool that is Twitter, TikTok, and WhatsApp. The older generation assumed which were only for entertainment. They spoke with a clarity and a moral authority that shook. It definitely shook institutions. And then now, this is the part I want to examine honestly. Many of them felt what happened after the high collective action. They felt the system push back. They felt the grief of those who were lost. They felt the frustration when the changes they demanded moved at a pace of a Kenyan bureaucracy, which is to say, the pace of a sick tortoise going uphill. And some of them withdrew, went back inside, went back to the scroll, went back to the numbness. This is not failure. This is a very human response to every real thing. Psychologists who study social movement know that the hardest phase is not the uprising. It's what comes after the maintenance phase, the unglamorous daily work of a civic life that does not trend on X and does not get you 100,000 views. So here is the truth I want to offer to every young person navigating this impossible space between live and stay and fight. You don't have to resolve this tension today. The tension is real. Both narratives have truth in them. But I want to suggest a third way, a way that does not require you to perform either martyrdom or escape. And it's this: decide what you're building and build it. If you stay with intention, not with bitterness, not with grudging sense of obligation, but with the understanding that your presence, your skill, your ethics lived out every single day. It's a political act. The teacher who shows up and teaches, really teaches, is doing something more durable. More durable. The engineer who builds something that works in Kenya, is for Kenya, is writing a chapter for his country's future. The business owner who refuses to pay a bribe, who pays their taxes, who treats the employees with dignity, that person is building a different culture, one transaction at a time. And if you live with accountability, stay connected, send home not just remittance, but ideas, mentorship, investments. Don't let the distance become a reason to stop caring. Your relationship with your homeland doesn't end at the airport, it just changes form. Because here is what I want to know: Kenya has always been built by people who showed up imperfectly, with incomplete information in difficult circumstances. That is the entire history of this place. And the next chapter will be no different. As I have said before, I don't have the map, but at least I showed up. That's all we are asking: showing up. Now we get to the uncomfortable part, because I would be doing you a disservice if this conversation were only about what has been done to us. We also need to talk about what we are doing, what we are choosing, and what we are participating in. It is easy. It is satisfying, actually, to blame a lot of things. And let me be clear: the especially politicians, they deserve critics. The accountability culture that our leader have systematically avoided for decades has real consequences, and those consequences are being paid daily by Blitin, by Brian, and by Kipu. This is not up for debate, but we cannot stop there, because he is the uncomfortable mirror. We complain about corruption, but do we pay the kitu kidogo to keep the line? I'm not asking rhetorically. I'm asking you to actually think about the last time you were in a situation where a small payment would make a problem go away faster. The policeman who just needs something small, the clerk at the government office who might be able to help, if the queue that can be skipped, if you know someone who knows someone. What did you do? Most of us, definitely I'm included, have at some point paid, or we have benefited from someone else paying. And when we do that, even with full awareness that it is wrong, even with the self justification that system forces you to, we are depositing into the very system we say we want to destroy. We are, in the language of psychology, engaging in moral licensing, the unconscious belief that because we are fundamentally good people with good value, this one small compromise doesn't really count. But it does. It does count. Every every kitukidogo counts. Not because any one payment is catastrophic. It isn't, but because 10 million small payments made by 10 million people who each believe they're the exception sustain a culture of corruption at a level that no anti corruption commission can touch. We complain about tribalism, but do we vote for Mtuetu regardless of the character? Again, sit with this honestly. In the last election, when you were in that booth with your ballot, what was the dominant factor in your decision? Was it the candidate's track record, their policy positions, their demonstrated integrity, or was it something older and more primal, the comfort of shared identity, the fear of other tribe winning, the social pressure from your community to vote correctly? I'm not accusing, I'm asking, because I think most of us are more honest about this in private than we are in public. And the gap between our private honesty and our public performance is the space where tribalism survives. There's a psychological concept called the bystander effect. When a person is in trouble in a crowd, people are statistically less likely to help than if the same person were alone with one bystander. Why? Because in a crowd, everyone assumes someone else will act. The diffusion of responsibility makes everyone passive. I think we have a national bystander effect. We all see the problems. We all feel the injustice, and we all quietly assume that someone else will fix it. Someone else will hold the corrupt politicians accountable. Someone else will report the bribe. Someone else will teach their children about civic responsibility. Someone else hey, will vote based on character instead of tribe. And so nobody does. Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that individuals are responsible for systematic failure. Systems fail because of a systematic reason: historical, structural, political. The problems of Kenya are not the results of 40 million personal moral failures. Please don't hear it that way. What I'm saying is this: systems change when enough individuals change their behavior at the same time. Culture is not a top down phenomenon, it is an aggregation of individual small choices made in millions of small moments every day. We have more urgency in those small moments than we are currently exercising. Democracy isn't just about the ink on your finger every 5 years. It's about the accountability you demand every single day in between. It's about the conversation you have at the family dinner when someone defends a corrupt relative. It is about the social media post you push back on when it spreads fear or hate. It's about the decision to buy from the local business instead of always going to buy to the big corporate chain. It's about 1,000 small choices that, in aggregate, create or destroy the Kenya we claim to want. Trying even imperfectly is everything. That is what I believe, and I was hoping you could believe it too. I want to go a little deeper now. Stay with me. I've said before that your past shaped you, but it doesn't own you. I believe that with everything in me, and I believe the same is true for nations. Kenyans' past is full of scars. Some of them were inflicted from outside, that is, colonial extraction, the deliberate disruption of communities, economies, and cultures. Some were self inflicted, the post election violence that we don't talk about it enough, the cycle of political manipulation that pits the poor against the poor while the wealthy watch from a safe distance. Some are old wounds, some are fresh ones. And there is a temptation, a very human, very understandable temptation, to let that history be the full explanation. To say, this is why we are the way we are. This is why things don't work. History happened to us, and we are its consequences. That is practically true. History matters enormously. Context matter. Anyone who tells you that the problems of the post-colonial African nation are simply a matter of bad choices and poor character is either ignorant or dishonest. But that is the but I think is that is essential. The past does not write the future. It informs it. It contextualizes it, but it does not determine it. Not if we refuse to let it. Every generation. Hey, let me sip tea. Every generation inherits problem. This is universal. No generation in history has received a clean slate. The question that defines a generation is not what did we inherit, is the question is what did we do with what we inherited? Your grandparents' generation inherited colonialisms. Your parents' generation inherited independence with all its promises and all its incomplete infrastructure. Your generation or our generation has inherited a nation that is structurally complex, politically fractured, economically unequal, and yet somehow still standing, still producing extraordinary people, still finding ways to be joyful and creative and resilient in the middle of difficulties. What will we do with that inheritance? I want to ask you to sit with three questions. Don't answer them. Uh, don't answer them for me. Answer them for yourselves in honest peace inside that the noise of the world does not usually reach. One, are you a victim of the system or a participant in it? Can you be both? What would it mean to acknowledge both truths simultaneously? Two, what kind of Kenya are you creating for the next generation? Not what kind of Kenya do you want? What kind are you creating right now with your choices and with your behaviors and your voice and your silence? Three, when did you stop believing the things could be different? Was there a specific moment, a specific betrayal, a specific disappointment that turned your hope into cynicism? And is that one moment, however painful it was, sufficient reason to surrender the entire future? Here's what I want to say. Cynicism is a form of surrender dressed up as sophistication. When we perform cynicism, when we talk about Kenya with a permanent mark, is if we are caring is naive, as if hope for people who don't know better. We're not being smart. We are protecting ourselves from the vulnerability of caring. And that protection has a cost. The cost is disengagement. And disengagement is exactly what the worst actors in our society are counting on. The things about hope is that it is not naive. Real hope, what Jagan Moltmann calls active hope, what the philosopher Rebecca Solnit calls hope in the dark, is not the belief that things will automatically get better. It is the refusal to accept that they will not. It is the decision to act as if your action matters. Not because you have the proof that they do, but because the alternative, acting as if they don't, guarantees the outcome you fear. Things are happening for us, not against us. I've also said that before. And what I mean when I say it is this: even in the hardest circumstances, there is urgency, there is meaning, there is something to be learned, built, or changed. The narrative of pure victimhood of a people at the mercies of forces entirely being beyond their control is not disempowering. It is also I believe not fully true. We have more power than we are currently using. The question is whether are we willing to bear the discomfort of using it? And as we come to the end of this conversation, and it has been a conversation, even if it's been mostly my voice, I want to leave you with something you can actually use, not a feeling. Though I hope you feel something practical, something you can do today, tomorrow, this week, or this year. I've been thinking about what it would look like for each of us to make small, specific commitment to a different kind of Kenya that we want. Not a grand gesture, not a revolution that requires everything from you at once. Just a pledge. I'm calling it the sense of self pledge because the name of this podcast, as it is, the sense of self, and because building a better nation starts with a better sense of who we are and what we stand for. Here it is. I will try to refuse one corrupt request this week. Not at all of them. Maybe that isn't safe. Maybe that isn't possible. But one, the next time someone asks you for kitu kidogo that isn't yours to give, you say no. The next time you are tempted to pay to skip the line, you don't. One refusal, one deposit into a different culture. I will have one honest conversation about tribalism. not a lecture, a conversation with a family member, with a friend, with a colleague, the kind where you ask questions instead of making pronouncements, where you try to understand rather than to win. One conversation that crosses the line we've drawn by even a millimeter. I will support one local business this week, not out of obligation, out of the understanding that economy resilience is built locally, one transaction at a time. The mama mboga, the local bookstore, the young man selling on Instagram, one decision to circulate money within our communities before it leaves them. I will protect my mental health from one fear amplifying source. Mute one account, leave one WhatsApp group that becomes a 24-hour panic room. Give yourself one morning this week where the phone doesn't come on until you have had 10 minutes of silence, of prayer, of movement, of whatever grounds you. One morning of protecting the 6 a.m. feeling. And I will tell one person that what they're doing matters. The nurse, the teacher, the boda rider, the cleaner in your office, the person doing the quiet and glamorous essential work that keeps everything running. One specific acknowledgement that what they are building matters because it actually does. And people who feel seen are people who keep doing or keep going. Small things, real things. Because Kenya is not going to be saved by one speech. It's not going to be saved by one leader, by one protest, or by one podcast. Kenya will be saved if it is saved by millions of small acts of courage and decency and care accumulated over time by ordinary people who refused to stop caring when caring became difficult. Kenya is more than its politicians. They come and they go, but still the land remains. Kenya is more than its scandals. They make the news, they do not make our character. Kenya is more than its crisis. We have survived everything we have encountered, everything, and we are still here, still creative, still resilient, still somehow beneath the exhaustion and the fear, still hopeful, even if that hope is quite right quite right now, even if it has gone underground, even if it's barely a flicker. Do not let fear be your only language. Do not let the war in your head convince you that hope is a luxury you can't afford. Hope is not a luxury. It is a discipline. And like all disciplines, it requires practice, especially on the days when it costs the most. A nation is not built by the people who shout the loudest. It's not built in the state house or in the halls of parliament. It is built by one decision made by the nurse who stays late, the teacher who buys a student a pencil out of their own pocket, the business owner who does or do his business happily and willingly and refuses to apologize for it, the citizen who speaks the truth even when their voices shake. It is built by you. Perhaps the question is not whether Kenya will change. Perhaps the real question, the only question that you and I can actually answer is, will we? And once again, I'm Kipkaskei. This has been the Sense of Self podcast. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves. And more importantly, take care of each other. It's never that complicated. It starts with you. Peace.